David was returning home from a business trip on a late evening flight. He was tired, yes, but the thought of seeing his family again smoothed out the tension in his back and shoulders. He loved these rare moments when Emily would be waiting with his favorite dinner, Emma would come running out of her room eager to share school news, and little Noah would wrap him in the tightest hug, babbling about all his mini adventures. Home had always been his sanctuary, the place where he felt needed, loved. But tonight, something felt different. From the moment he stepped through the door of their quiet two-story suburban home, David sensed it. The house, usually full of life and noise, greeted him with silence. A single light glowed in the kitchen, but there was no smell of food, and the air felt thick with a strange, almost anxious stillness. He set his suitcase by the front door and stood still, listening. Somewhere deeper in the house, light footsteps rustled, too light to be Emily's. "Dad," came a hesitant voice. Emma stood in the doorway of her room, clutching her tablet. Her face was tense, lips pressed together. "Hey, sweetheart," he smiled, crouching down with open arms. But she didn't run to him like she always did. She walked over slowly and let him hug her, but without her usual warmth. "Everything okay? Where's Mom?" Emma looked down at the rug as if it held the answer. "She's not home." That was strange. Emily would never leave the kids alone in the evening, especially when he was due back from a trip. "She said she was going to a friend's," she added, almost reluctantly. "To which friend?" he asked, keeping his tone even. She shrugged, biting her lip. Her nervousness was obvious, like she knew something, but was afraid to say it. "Did you eat already?" he asked, changing the subject as he stood and walked into the kitchen. "Yeah," she said, quietly. Then, after a pause, "Dad, please don't be mad." He stopped in his tracks and turned to her. "Why would I be mad?" Her lips quivered, but then she blurted it out. "I think Mom's seeing someone." The words landed like a thunderclap. He stood frozen, as if scalded with boiling water. For a split second he thought he'd misheard her. "What did you say?" His voice came out sharp, almost unrecognizable. Emma stepped back, frightened. "I saw her with some guy," she said quickly, like if she didn't say it fast, she'd lose the courage to say it at all. "He picks her up in a black SUV. They talk, laugh. I saw them from my window." A wave of pressure built in David's chest. His fists clenched involuntarily. His heart was pounding so loud it felt like the whole house could hear it. But he fought to stay composed, though inside he was boiling. "When was this?" he asked, voice flat. "A few times," she answered, still staring at the floor. "Last night, I saw her again." David felt his whole reality shifting, cracking. He had trusted Emily, sure they had their usual problems like any couple, but he never doubted her loyalty. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge aimlessly, needing something solid to anchor him. There was an empty yogurt cup, a couple jars of baby food, and a half-full bottle of wine. Emily hardly drank, maybe a glass at holidays, nothing more. That wine bottle made his stomach churn. "You're sure you didn't misread it?" he asked over his shoulder. Silence. Then, "I'm sorry, Dad." Emma's voice came out in a whisper. He closed the fridge and turned around. Her eyes were glossy with tears. She looked so small, so torn, as if she didn't know whether telling him had been the right thing. David exhaled, trying to soften his tone. "It's okay. You did the right thing." He pulled her into a hug, but behind his calm voice, his mind was racing. He needed the truth, and he needed it fast.
The next morning, David woke up before sunrise. He hadn't slept much. His thoughts spun all night like a broken carousel. But oddly enough, the exhaustion only fueled his resolve. As Emma got ready for school, he sat silently at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee. He didn't want to jump to conclusions based on what his daughter had seen. He needed facts. Once Emma left for school, David got to work. He needed to know who this mystery man was, the one in the black SUV. He remembered Emma mentioning the car. That would be his first lead. Being a software engineer with a systematic mind, David knew how to dig for the truth. It started with the neighborhood security office. The HOA's security booth was located just a block away. He had met some of the staff before when he installed his own home surveillance system. A couple of friendly conversations and 2 boxes of premium coffee later, he was inside, reviewing footage. The security cameras didn't record sound, but the images were sharp enough. David sat in front of the monitor, scanning video after video from the past week. Finally, on day 4, there it was. Late one night, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside his house. The camera caught the front door opening. Emily stepped outside. A man was already sitting in the driver's seat, but he got out and walked around to greet her. His face was partially in shadow, but it was clear. She knew him well. She smiled, talked, and then, before getting into the car, she casually ran her hand along his shoulder in a way that made David's blood run cold. It was subtle, but unmistakably intimate. David stared at the screen, unable to look away. It felt like watching a movie that wasn't his life, but every frame carved itself into his memory. No more doubts, no more excuses. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Back at home, he downloaded the clip onto a USB drive. He had a plan forming in his mind. Emily would be home from work by evening, but he couldn't wait that long. He needed to know who this man was. He had a license plate number, so he made a call. "Hey, Vic," he said as soon as his friend picked up. Vic was a longtime buddy from David's college days, now working in traffic enforcement. "I need a favor. Can you run a plate for me?" There was a pause. "Is everything okay?" "Honestly, I'm not sure, but please, it's urgent." 2 hours later, Vic called back. "The vehicle's registered to Max Efron, mid-40s, owns a small business, bought the car about 2 years ago, married. 2 kids." David thanked him and hung up, the name already echoing in his mind. Max Efron. He sat down at his computer. The internet had plenty of answers, if you knew how to ask the right questions. It didn't take long before he found the man's social media profile. There he was. Tall, well-groomed, smiling in photo after photo, always with his wife and children. David stared at the pictures, trying to make sense of what this man could possibly offer Emily that he hadn't. By the time evening rolled around, David had watched the video a dozen times. When the front door finally opened and Emily walked in, he didn't move. She froze. Surprise flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it with a casual smile. "You're home early," she said, trying to sound breezy. "How was your trip?" "Fine," he replied. "Want some tea?" "Sure." She opened a cabinet, pretending to search for something. "Work was good today," she added, trying to fill the silence. "You went to see your friend last night?" She froze. Slowly, she turned toward him. "Yes, Irene," she said, almost too carefully. I placed my mug down on the table with deliberate calm. "That's strange," he said evenly. "I checked the security footage from our driveway." Emily blinked. Too slowly. "I didn't know Irene drives a black SUV." She turned pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. David waited. Finally, she spoke. "David, it's not what you think." "Oh, really?" His voice sharpened. "He's just a colleague. He gave me a ride home, that's all." David gave a small, almost sympathetic nod, then reached into his pocket, pulled out the USB stick, and set it on the table. "Watch it, and then say that to me again." Emily's face twisted. She understood. She was caught. "David, it didn't mean anything." He stood up, cutting her off. "Didn't mean anything? You're in his car, laughing, touching him." Emily looked away, avoiding his eyes. "I can explain," she whispered. But David shook his head. "No, you don't need to explain anything anymore." He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" she called after him, panic rising in her voice. "To find out the rest of the truth." He slammed the door behind him. David drove aimlessly through quiet suburban streets, adrenaline pumping through every vein. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. He didn't have a destination, just the need to move, to breathe, to not explode. He ended up at home hours later, still wired, still burning. Sleep was impossible. Instead, he spent the night in front of his computer. The glow of the screen lit his tired face as he scoured every digital trace he could find. More photos of Max, old news articles, business records. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And the more he saw, the more everything in his life began to unravel. The next morning, the house was quiet. Emma had gone to school. Little Noah was with their longtime babysitter, Rachel, Emily's cousin, and someone who had become like family over the years. She was there when David came into the kitchen, still looking like he hadn't slept. "You okay, David?" she asked gently, handing him a cup of tea. He paused for a moment, then forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, just didn't sleep well." Rachel looked at him longer than usual, clearly sensing something was wrong, but she didn't push. Once everyone was gone, David moved with purpose. He began methodically packing Emily's things: shoes, makeup, clothes, dresses that once reminded him of anniversaries and holidays, now reduced to objects, meaningless, just fabric. He stuffed them all into 2 large suitcases and wheeled them into the hallway. Then he grabbed his toolbox and changed the locks on the front door. He wanted everything finished before she got home. Before noon, it was done. The next step would be harder, but necessary. He pulled up the profile of Max's wife. Her name was Kate. She looked strong, elegant, the kind of woman who didn't fall apart easily. Her phone number wasn't Koblik, but David was good with search tools. Within an hour, he found it. He hesitated for only a moment, then dialed. "Hello?" A calm but curious female voice answered. "Hi, is this Kate Efron?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is David. I know we've never met, but I believe we have something painful in common. Your husband, my wife Emily..." There was a long pause on the other end. Then her voice, slightly trembling, "What are you saying?" "I think your husband is having an affair with my wife Emily, and I have proof." Silence again. He could hear her breathing. "Where can we meet?" she asked at last. Her voice had changed, still shaken, but now steeled with resolve. They met at a coffee shop near her neighborhood that afternoon. David brought a laptop and the USB stick. Kate was beautiful, but there was a fatigue in her eyes, a heaviness she wore like armor. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Show me," she said. He inserted the drive and played the footage. She didn't flinch as she watched. When it ended, she closed the laptop and stared into the distance for a long moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I knew something was wrong. I didn't want to believe it." David nodded. "You deserve to know." "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she added, her voice brittle but dignified. No, I'm sorry we both did. She stood and reached out her hand. He'll regret this. David shook her hand. He didn't doubt it. As she walked away, head high and eyes dry, David realized that this was the right thing to do. The truth was ugly, but it was better than lies.
When David got back home that evening, Emily was already there. She stood in the hallway, her face pale, eyes darting between the suitcases and the new locks on the front door. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice rising. David remained calm. "It means you don't live here anymore." "You can't do that," she snapped. "This is my house too." "I have every right," he replied, still quiet. "What I don't have to do is tolerate betrayal." "I didn't," she started, but he cut her off. "Your things are packed. Your keys won't work anymore. You can go to Maxim." Emily froze, mouth open. Then her eyes welled up. "David, you don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly. I found out from our daughter, Emily. Emma had to carry your secret because you were too much of a coward to admit it yourself." Her face crumpled. I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." "You had a family, a husband who stood by you, kids who adored you. And you threw it all away. For what? Flirting? A little attention?" Tears rolled down her cheeks, but David was unmoved. "There's no going back," he said, voice steady. "We're done." He opened the door. Emily stood there a second longer, trembling. Then, slowly, she stepped outside, dragging the suitcases behind her like anchors. David shut the door. That night, Emily returned to the small apartment she used to rent years ago when she was fresh out of college, still building a life. Now, it felt like a prison. She dropped her bags, closed the door, and collapsed on the couch in tears. The walls seemed to close in. The apartment was old, cramped, with peeling paint and that faint scent of forgotten years. This wasn't supposed to be her life. She thought about David, how steady he had always been, how patient, how he believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. Now, he was gone, and she knew he wouldn't come back. The next morning, Emily tried to compose herself. Her logical mind kicked in. She had to do something, fix it, undo the damage. She called David, left voicemails. "Please, let's talk. You're misunderstanding everything. I love you, David, and the kids. Please don't shut me out." No response. That evening, she went back to the house. The new lock greeted her like a slap in the face. She stood there for several minutes before finally ringing the bell. David opened the door a crack. His face was closed, distant. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice flat. "Please, just let me talk." "I'm listening." "I made a mistake. I know that, but I want to fix it." David leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "How do you plan to fix the fact that our daughter was the one who had to tell me?" Emily looked away, ashamed. "I was confused. I was lonely." David shook his head. "Don't." "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "I'm not interested in your excuses," he said. "You had a family, a home, and you risked it all." Her voice broke. "But I didn't." "You meant enough to smile at him, laugh with him, touch him. That was enough." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I just want a second chance." But David's voice turned to ice. "There's nothing left to come back to." Emily stood on the porch for several minutes after the door shut, her breath visible in the cold air, her pride shattered. She wiped her face, but the tears kept coming. She tried again the next day, calling, texting, even messaging Rachel, hoping she could convince David to give her another chance. But Rachel never answered. She didn't need to. When Emily showed up at the house again, it was Rachel who greeted her. "I just want to talk to him," Emily said, voice trembling. Rachel's eyes were calm, but cold. "David doesn't want to see you, Emily. You need to respect that." "I made a mistake. People make mistakes." Rachel looked at her for a long time, her voice soft but firm. "This wasn't a mistake. You betrayed your husband. You hurt your kids. This isn't something you can undo with an apology." Emily turned away, humiliated, and walked back to her car. Days passed, then weeks. David, meanwhile, poured everything he had into being a father. Morning breakfasts became sacred rituals. He helped Emma with her science projects, packed Noah's lunches with little notes inside, and made sure bedtime stories were a nightly event. He tried to fill every space Emily had once occupied, not out of spite, but out of necessity. He was all they had now. Still, he noticed the changes. Emma, once bubbly and curious, had become quieter. She buried herself in homework and rarely smiled. Noah, too young to fully understand, often asked, "When's Mommy coming home?" His heart broke every time, but he answered gently, "Mom's just busy right now, buddy, but you can always talk to her if you want." He never spoke badly of Emily in front of the kids. No matter how hurt he was, he knew they still loved their mother and always would. Rachel became their constant. She helped with homework, made dinner when David was buried in work, and always knew just how to comfort the kids when they were missing their mom. One night, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch and Emma had gone to bed, David and Rachel sat together in the kitchen. A soft glow filled the room, and the smell of chamomile tea hung in the air. "You're amazing, Rachel," David said, looking at her across the table. She smiled shyly. "Where's that coming from?" "You've done more for us than I can ever thank you for," he said, his tone sincere. "I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you." Rachel looked down, embarrassed. "You've always been the strong one, David. Even when Emily treated you unfairly, you still believed in her." David gave a sad smile. "I wanted to believe in us." He paused. "But lately, I'm starting to believe that life might actually be better now." Rachel's eyes met his. She didn't respond, didn't need to. Her expression said everything. From the living room came a sleepy voice. "Dad, is Miss Rachel gonna live with us forever?" They both laughed gently. David carried Noah to bed, but that simple question echoed in his mind. Every day, Rachel was becoming a part of their world. She had a way of making the house feel warm again, safe, whole. In the days that followed, Rachel became more than just a helper. She became a presence, a source of calm, a quiet strength that pulled them all forward. One evening, Emma looked up from the dinner table, her voice soft. "You know, since Aunt Rachel's been here, the house feels nicer, like warmer." David blinked, surprised. Then he smiled. "You're right," he said. Rachel flushed, clearly touched, but said nothing. She just kept passing mashed potatoes. A week later, Emma suggested a family outing, just the four of them. She wanted to visit the state park an hour out of town. "We could have a picnic," she said hopefully. Rachel offered to help pack everything. She made pies that morning, filled thermoses with hot cocoa, and organized a bag with games and blankets. It was her way, quiet, thoughtful, full of care. That day, the weather was unseasonably warm for fall.
The trees were painted in rich reds and golds. Leaves crunched beneath their feet as they walked forest trails, with Noah running ahead collecting acorns. They laughed. They raced. They built leaf piles just to jump in them again. On a sunny clearing, they laid out the picnic. David took a bite of Rachel's apple pie and leaned back with a grin. "This is the best thing I've eaten in months." "You're just hungry," she teased. "Nope, you're a magician." Rachel laughed, but there was something deeper in her eyes, a softness David was beginning to notice more often. Later, as the kids played nearby with sticks, pretending to be pirates, David and Rachel sat side by side on a bench carved from fallen timber. The silence was easy, comfortable. "You know," David said, staring at the trees, "I used to think I'd never trust again, that after everything, I wouldn't be able to let anyone in." Rachel turned to him. "And now?" He met her gaze. "Now, I think trust is something you build, and you've earned it." She looked down, her hands folded in her lap. "That means a lot." David reached over and gently squeezed her hand. Just a touch, but one that carried meaning. That day felt different. It wasn't just a family outing. It was a beginning, a reset, a chance for something real to grow where something else had broken. As the sun began to dip below the treetops, Noah climbed onto David's lap, exhausted. Emma leaned her head on Rachel's shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, David felt whole again.
Winter arrived in full force. Snow blanketed the streets, rooftops sparkled under morning frost, and David found joy in planning small adventures for the kids: sledding, snowmen, hot cocoa nights by the fire. Then one day, the idea came. "We should go to the mountains," Rachel said. "Take a real break, just us." The thought electrified Emma and Noah. Their eyes lit up. It would be their first real vacation without Emily, and it felt symbolic. A new page. David found a cozy cabin at a ski resort just a few hours' drive away, rustic with a fireplace, a big Christmas tree already decorated in twinkling lights, and a view of snow-covered slopes from every window. As soon as they arrived, the kids ran from room to room with squeals of excitement. "This is going to be the best Christmas ever," Noah shouted, flopping onto the couch. "Thanks for coming with us," David said to Rachel, helping her unpack a bag. She smiled. "Thanks for letting me be part of this." The next morning, David attempted to teach Noah how to ski. It was chaos. Noah kept falling, laughing every time, but never gave up. "I'm going to be a champion," he yelled, barely keeping his balance. David laughed, steadying him. "You've got this, champ." Meanwhile, Emma had joined a group snowboarding lesson with kids her age. David noticed how her guardedness was starting to fade. She smiled more. She cracked jokes again. Rachel, ever graceful, chose to ski alone that day. Watching her from the bottom of the slope, hair flying, cheeks flushed with cold, David couldn't help but feel something stir in his chest. "You're amazing," he said when she came gliding back. "Just takes practice," she replied, laughing as she shook snow off her hat. But on the third day, things took an unexpected turn. Noah, feeling brave, tried to go a little faster than he should have. He lost control and tumbled down a small incline right into a girl standing off to the side. "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry," he cried, scrambling to his feet. David rushed over in a panic. The girl, about 7 years old, stood up, brushing snow from her jacket. "You okay?" David asked her. "I'm fine," she said, grinning. Then a tall man hurried over. "Mary, are you all right?" "Yeah, Dad, I'm good." The man looked up at David and offered his hand. "I'm John." "David,"
he replied, shaking it. That's how it started. John was a surgeon from a nearby city, spending the week with his daughter after a rough year. He and David struck up an easy conversation, their personalities clicking almost instantly. That night, they ran into each other again at the lodge restaurant. Rachel joined them for dinner. To David's surprise, she and Ivan began talking too, and kept talking. They laughed. They shared stories. There was something subtle there, an ease, a kindness. The kids got along as well. Emma took Mary under her wing, helping her with her snowboard. Noah told exaggerated tales about surviving the slopes like a superhero. Later that night, as the kids drifted to sleep and the fire crackled in the stone hearth, David sat beside Rachel with a cup of tea. "John seems like a good guy," he said. Rachel glanced sideways. "You think so?" "I think he thinks the same about you." She blushed slightly. "He's easy to talk to." David looked into the fire. "You deserve that." She turned to him, surprised. "You've been taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time someone takes care of you." Rachel didn't reply, but her eyes softened. And in the quiet, snow still falling outside, something unspoken settled between them. Trust, respect, maybe even something even deeper. But without rush, just peace. The following days at the resort passed like a dream. David, Rachel, the kids, and John with little Mary became an unofficial group. They'd spend mornings on the slopes, afternoons by the fire, and evenings sharing dinners and stories. Rachel and John grew more relaxed around each other. John's calm, thoughtful presence seemed to draw out Rachel's quieter side. She laughed more, smiled with ease. David noticed, and it didn't bother him. Quite the opposite. One evening, as they sat watching the kids build a snow fort outside the cabin, David turned to Rachel. "He's a good man," he said. Rachel looked at him, confused for a second. "John." She smiled softly, looking out the window. "He is." David nodded. "If something good comes out of all of this for you, I'd be happy." Rachel turned to him, eyes searching. "You've taken care of us," he continued. "You've held this family together when I thought it would fall apart. And I hope someone gives you that same kind of care." She didn't answer right away, just stared into the fire, her arms wrapped around a blanket. Later that night, after a shared meal with Ivan and the kids, David and Rachel sat on the cabin porch, sipping hot cider. The stars above were crisp and bright. Rachel spoke first. "You've changed." David raised an eyebrow. "Hopefully not for the worse." She smiled. "No, you're stronger now, clearer." "I had to be," he said. "For the kids, for myself. And for what's next?" David met her gaze. "I don't know what's next, but for the first time, I'm not afraid of it." They sat in silence for a long moment. Meanwhile, a very different silence had taken hold elsewhere. Emily's world was collapsing. Since the confrontation at the house, her life had spiraled. She had tried to keep her job, to act like everything was fine, but the cracks showed. She missed deadlines, fumbled presentations. Her coworkers began whispering behind her back. Eventually, she was called into HR. Her resignation was encouraged, and she left the office with a cardboard box and no idea what came next. With nothing left to lose, she called Maxim. No answer. She drove to his house, desperate, clinging to any thread. But when the door opened, it wasn't him. It was his mother, cold, unsmiling. "She's not here," the woman said, "and even if he were, you wouldn't be welcome." "I just need to talk." The door slammed in her face. Back in her tiny apartment, Emily cracked. The walls felt smaller, the silence more punishing. Wine bottles started collecting on the floor. Her mirror reflected someone she barely recognized. Messy hair, tired eyes, clothes that no longer flattered but sagged. Sometimes she looked at old photos, family trips, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, Emma's missing front teeth, Noah's drawings taped to the fridge. David smiling, arm around her, unaware of what was coming. The past now felt like a lifetime ago. One night she left a voicemail for Rachel, half drunk, full of anger and desperation. "I know he doesn't want to see me, but he's still my husband. My children are still my children. You think you can just take my place?" Rachel never responded. But the next morning, she showed the message to David. He listened, then simply deleted it. "She's trying to find someone to blame. I won't let her do it to you." Rachel didn't ask him to explain further. She didn't need to. By now, they were past explanations. They had built something real, and it was only growing stronger.
One night, after too many drinks and too few answers, Emily heard a knock on her apartment door. It was Max, disheveled, smelling of stale alcohol and cologne. He stood there with that same charming smile that once fooled her. "I just wanted to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. She didn't stop him. They sat in silence at her kitchen table, surrounded by unopened bills and half-eaten leftovers. Finally, Max spoke. "Things didn't go the way I planned." Emily scoffed. "We didn't plan anything." "You knew what this was," he shot back, a little too quickly. Emily's eyes narrowed. "You ruined my life, Max." He shook his head. "I didn't make you do anything." And that broke her. She stood, grabbed the nearest bottle and hurled it at the wall. The crash echoed like a scream. "Get out," she shouted, voice ragged. "Get out of my life." Max didn't argue. He simply left, his arrogance finally drained. The next morning, Emily's neighbor found her passed out on the floor. Glass everywhere, empty bottles. Paramedics took her to the ER. Diagnosis: severe alcohol poisoning. When she opened her eyes in a hospital bed, the first face she saw was David's. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "Because you're the mother of my children. But Emily, this is the last time. If you don't get help, I won't be able to help you anymore." Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She turned her head toward the window and said nothing. That hospital visit became her wake-up call. Once discharged, Emily returned to her apartment and began the long, painful climb back up. She threw out the bottles, found a therapist, applied for part-time work at a local store. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her structure and dignity. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Meanwhile, across town, another life was quietly transforming. Kate, Max's wife, had taken David's warning seriously. After watching the video of her husband's betrayal, she didn't cry, she didn't beg, she got to work. She collected messages, screenshots, photos. Being a paralegal gave her the tools to prepare everything cleanly and thoroughly, so when Max finally returned to their house, trying to act like nothing had happened, she was ready. "You look like someone who hoped to avoid this," she said as he walked in. He tried to charm her. "I just needed some space to think." She handed him a manila envelope. "What's this?" "Divorce papers," she said, her voice calm. He laughed nervously. "You're not serious." "You ended this marriage long before I printed those papers," she said. Max stared at her, confused, off balance. "You always knew I'd put up with your games," Kate added, "but you finally gave me permission to stop." Max opened his mouth but found no words. That night, he went to stay at his mother's.
Mrs. Gail Simmons, his stern, unyielding mother, was waiting for him. In her small kitchen, arms crossed. "I warned you," she said. "You thought you could do what you wanted without consequence." "Can we not do this tonight?" Max groaned, but her voice cut through him like ice. "You don't just lose a wife like Kate and think it'll be okay. You've never taken responsibility for anything. That ends now." Max stormed off to the spare bedroom, but her words followed him like ghosts. And Kate? She was already writing her next chapter. It had been 3 months since Kate signed the divorce papers. No dramatic fights, no screaming, just quiet resolution and a cold signature on the dotted line. After everything Max had done, after the betrayal, the humiliation, she didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But peace wasn't easy to find. Her days were filled with silence. The kids were with her part-time. The rest of the time, she worked, came home, ate dinner alone, and tried not to remember what her life used to be. Until one day, an unexpected message came from David. "Hey, just wanted to check in. I know someone who might be good company. Not a setup, just coffee, no pressure." She almost ignored it, but something in the simplicity of his words nudged her, gently. They met at a quiet cafe near the park. He introduced himself as John, a trauma surgeon who had gone through his own version of collapse. His wife had passed years ago, and since then it was just him and his daughter, Mary. Kate didn't expect anything, but the conversation was easy. She told him about the divorce, the pain, the shame, the strange emptiness that came after letting go of someone you thought you'd grow old with. John didn't interrupt, didn't offer cliché advice. He just listened. And then he shared his own story, not in dramatic detail, but enough to make her feel less alone. They talked for almost 2 hours that first day, and they met again the next week, and the week after. On their 4th meeting, as they strolled through the farmer's market on a rainy Saturday, John suddenly stopped. "I want to show you something," he said, pulling a small pouch from his coat pocket. Kate blinked. "What's this?" He handed it to her without a word. Inside was a pendant, simple, delicate, silver, shaped like a tiny tree. She looked up, puzzled. "I saw it and thought of you," he said. "Roots, growth, quiet strength." Kate's throat tightened. "No one's given me a gift without expecting something in return in a long time," she whispered. "I don't expect anything," John said. "Except maybe another coffee." She laughed, a soft, real laugh that surprised even her. She nodded. "You've got yourself a deal." They didn't rush anything. No grand declarations, no wild romance, just companionship. And little by little, the pain in Kate's chest gave way to something new. Not fireworks, not fantasies, but something far more valuable. Stability, kindness, respect. The beginning of a good life. They were 2 people who had been hurt and healed, together. Weeks passed. Emily kept her head down and tried to rebuild what little she could. She got a job as a cashier at a small corner store. It wasn't what she used to do, but it was steady, predictable. And for the first time in months, she was sober. She didn't dare call David anymore. Instead, she focused on something she hadn't before, being accountable. Not for him, not for Max, for herself. But her heart still ached for her children. Every few days, she would send Emma a short message. "I'm thinking of you. I know I messed up, but I love you. I hope you're okay." No responses. Until one day, the message showed red. It was just a little indicator, but to Emily, it was like a spark in the dark. Meanwhile, life at David's house had begun to settle into something resembling peace. The routines he'd once done out of necessity now became something deeper.
He enjoyed making pancakes on Sunday mornings. Emma started coming to him more with stories from school. Noah became obsessed with building forts and insisted on calling David Captain Dad. Rachel was with them through it all. She didn't try to replace anyone. She didn't push. She simply showed up, day after day, with kindness and warmth. And it worked. One evening, Emma and Rachel were baking cookies together, covered in flour, when the girl asked, "Do you love my dad?" Rachel froze for a second, the question hanging in the air like a snowflake. "I think so," she said honestly. Emma nodded. "You should tell him." Rachel laughed, nervously. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" Emma said, looking up with that same clear gaze that David had. Rachel smiled, but didn't answer. That night, as the house quieted and the kids drifted off to bed, David and Rachel sat at the kitchen table drinking tea, like so many nights before. He looked at her. She looked at him. There was something unspoken between them, something that no longer needed to be questioned. "You saved us," he said, breaking the silence. Rachel shook her head. "You saved yourself." "No," he said, reaching across the table, gently taking her hand, and then, without ceremony or hesitation, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was warm, familiar. It felt right. That same week, Emily sent another message. "Emma, I know I hurt you, but I want to be better. I don't expect forgiveness, just a chance, someday." This time, the message wasn't just read. There was a response. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm not angry anymore." Emily stared at the words on the screen, tears in her eyes. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't redemption. But it was something. A thread. And she would hold on to it as long as it took. Years passed. Time didn't erase everything, but it softened the edges. David's home became a place of warmth and rhythm. Laughter returned. The walls that once echoed with silence now carried the sound of family dinners, homework struggles, and game night arguments over who cheated at Monopoly. Rachel never pushed herself into the spotlight, but over time she became the heart of their home. Her quiet wisdom, her gentle presence, they were what held the pieces together. Emma grew into a strong, focused young woman. She graduated top of her class, went to med school, and followed the path she'd dreamed of ever since she was a little girl with a plastic stethoscope. Noah, once the wild, giggling toddler, became a curious teenager, still full of questions, still full of life. And now, today was Emma's wedding day. David stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie, heart thudding like he was the one getting married. His little girl, his anchor during those stormy years, was about to start a life of her own. "Looking sharp," came Rachel's voice from the doorway. He turned. She stood there in a simple, elegant champagne-colored dress, her hair gently curled, her eyes glowing. He smiled. "You look breathtaking." She stepped closer, fixing his crooked collar. "You always get nervous before big speeches." "I'm not nervous," he lied. Rachel grinned. "Sure you're not." In the reflection behind her, he saw the woman who had walked into his broken world with kindness and stayed through every hard moment. "You saved me, Rachel. You saved all of us." She shook her head. "You saved each other." Downstairs, the ceremony was about to begin. A white arch decorated with soft pink roses, guests laughing, smiling, taking their seats. Noah was already pacing, assigned as ring bearer and taking it very seriously.
David waited near the aisle, watching the crowd when someone quietly slipped into the back row. It was Emily. She wore a modest dress, her hair simple, her expression hesitant. Emma had invited her, a decision made after long talks, silent pauses, and tearful reconciliations that took years to build. Emily didn't ask for a front row seat. She was just grateful to be there. When the music started, everyone stood. Emma walked down the aisle, radiant in white, her hand gently looped through David's arm. He could barely breathe. At the altar stood Alex, her fiancé, with kind eyes and a trembling smile, the same look David remembered having decades ago. When it was time for the father's speech, David stepped forward. He took the microphone, cleared his throat, and looked at his daughter. "Emma," he began, voice steady, "watching you grow up was the greatest journey of my life. Even in our darkest times, you were my light. And today I see that light shining even brighter because you've found someone who deserves it." He turned to Alex. "Take care of her. Love her. Fight for her when life gets hard. Because this is everything." Applause echoed through the hall. David returned to his seat beside Rachel. She took his hand, squeezing it tightly. And in that moment, surrounded by the people they loved, the ones they'd lost, and the ones they'd rebuilt with, David finally felt at peace.
After the ceremony, guests laughed, danced, toasted with champagne, and filled the air with stories and music. Emma and Alex glowed, completely lost in each other. David and Rachel stepped outside for a moment of quiet. Snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, blanketing the earth in peace. They stood on the terrace, wrapped in the hush of night, their fingers intertwined. "It was perfect," Rachel whispered. David nodded. "Because you were there." She gave a quiet laugh. "I didn't do much. You did more than you'll ever know." They fell into silence, watching the snow settle on the trees. Then David turned to her. "You were there when everything fell apart. You held me up, and then you became everything." Rachel's eyes shimmered. "David, I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you for a long time, and I want you beside me for whatever comes next." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she smiled through them. "I love you too." He leaned in and kissed her, slow, warm, certain. It wasn't a beginning, not really. It was a homecoming. From the window behind them, Emma watched her dad and Rachel through a lace curtain. She smiled, then turned away, heart full. At the back of the reception hall, Emily sat quietly, alone with her thoughts. She watched her daughter dance, and for once didn't ache with guilt, just with something softer. Acceptance. She'd lost a lot, but she hadn't lost everything. After the cake was cut and the last song faded, Emma approached her mother. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. "Thank you for letting me," Emily whispered. "You're trying. I see that. I can't promise anything, but this means a lot." Emily nodded, swallowing back tears. "That's more than I deserve." Emma gave her a brief, delicate hug, then walked away. And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel completely empty. Years passed, quietly and kindly. David and Rachel married in a small backyard ceremony. Just the kids and a few close friends. It was simple. It was enough. The house grew warmer, richer. Family photos lined the hallways. The scent of cinnamon and coffee filled every morning. Emma became a doctor. Noah went off to college. And David, he never forgot the pain, but he no longer lived in it. He'd rebuilt, with Rachel by his side. One crisp autumn afternoon, he stood by the porch, watching Rachel in the garden. Her laughter carried on the wind. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since everything fell apart, he felt whole.